I'd like to call this regular city council meeting of September 9, 2013 to order. We'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call shows that all of council and department heads expected to be here are here. Review the minutes of August 26.
I'll move.
I'll support.
I have a change on page 3. At the top of the page, it says, where it says Council Kibble asked, I'd like it to read, because it's sort of disjointed there. Kibble asked if the city could demonstrate we've been proactive and created financial projections for our future rates. Would we still have to pay consultants to do the same thing, or at least would the projections need to be confirmed by a firm? I've given Lisa a copy of that, so she doesn't have to listen to it again.
I'll move them as amended.
Okay, I'll support it.
Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Monthly bills. Okay, Harvey?
Thank you. On the check register, about halfway down, there's a Terminex bill for pest control. Do we have a pest problem somewhere?
We do in this building with spiders and,
This building, or?
what are those called?
Earwigs?
Earwigs, yeah.
Oh, okay. That's all I want to know. Thanks.
Only 70. Damn. That would be.
Anybody else have a question on the bills?
I move the bills.
I'll second.
Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approval of the agenda, any additions, deletions?
No, sir, not this evening.
Unless there's something new.
I'll move the agenda.
Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public comment. At this time, if anybody wishes to speak on an item that is not listed on our agenda, you could do so. Okay, seeing none, we can move on to old business, which we have none. Now, new business. Pumpkin Fest 2013. We have some representation here.
Good evening, Scott Black on behalf of South Lyon Pumpkin Fest. We're seeking the road closure starting on Friday, September 27th at 9:30 a.m. and open it back up on September 29th at 8 o'clock.
Questions on that, anybody?
Looks just grand.
I'll make the motion then that we approve the requested road closures for the 2013 Pumpkin Fest.
I'll second.
Further discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
You're very persuasive.
Excuse me, Scott. On the signature page, you have 9:30, it's closing Friday?
Yeah. 9:30 is correct. I think on the application, I just caught that earlier today. It says 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
9:30 is what we got signature on from all the business owners.
Okay,
So
just,
9:30,
I'll get some calls, so.
Yep.
So you're asking then for 9:30?
correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we have the Pumpkin Fest Parade. Voila.
Phil Wiper's supposed to be here. He's going to be represent that. He's going to be the team person on that, so I'll try and field any questions you may have. Essentially, it's the same route, same times as last year.
Are you getting the volunteers like last year, do you know?
Volunteers have been hard on both the Pumpkin Fest and the parade, but we're getting close.
Anything you want to add to that, Chief?
I have spoken with Mr. Wypert, and he assured me that he would have approximately 30 volunteers. I don't have a list of names or anything, but I have to take him at his word at this point.
What happens if we don't get them? Is there a plan B?
Then we'll do the best we can with the police personnel and the deputies from the sheriff's office that we do have available.
Okay.
Of course, the concerns being somebody at each intersection.
The intersections will be controlled either way. The volunteers would be stationed at
Like the parking
commercial
lots.
drives and
That's what I
and
mean, yeah.
non-intersection access points.
Well, we're looking forward to it. I make a motion that we approve the parade road closing.
I'll second.
Further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Gonna be great.
Farmers Market.
The farmer's market director is here. Perhaps she'd like to come up and make the request herself.
Hi, I am Mary Nabraki. I am market manager for the farmers market. Our market is operating on Saturdays now. We are in the north parking lot of West Liberty and Lafayette, but we are moving for the Pumpkin Fest to the south parking lot for obvious reasons. So my first question is, would the city have any problem with us opening earlier that day and then closing later that day? Probably opening up early enough to be able to get all the vendors in before the parade comes through, which I'm still not certain when the parade's going to come through. I thought that would be cleared up, but not so far. So the parade, I don't know the route, but I thought somebody told me it was coming down West Liberty. So, and that's right in front of where our vendors need to go into their parking lot. Does anybody have an answer?
That's the way the parade route goes.
So what time then, I know Phil's not here, but what time, does anybody know what time that road closes so I can get the vendors in?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock it
Yes.
closes? Okay. so-
Mr. Mayor, if I could,
Yes.
for fire truck turning radius and emergency vehicle access, there will be no parking on either side of any of those bypass roads for the entire Pumpkin Fest weekend, including that Saturday morning.
Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about, though.
Yeah. Well, he's concerned
know
with
that.
the right there by the phone company headquarters and stuff right there. When they want that all cleared. You can't have vendors parking in that area.
No, I'm not talking about parking on the streets. I'm talking about when they can pull into the street and pull into the parking lot to set up their booths.
Yeah, they would have to be before 10 o'clock.
Okay.
The parade starts at 10 o'clock south of town.
And then what are they going to do with their trucks after?
They've
Yeah,
been-
and that's my other question, is how do they take down and get out of there? They would I'm asking
time?
if we could stay open till about 5 o'clock on Saturday.
Then I don't see a problem with that.
Okay, all right.
Parade's long gone. It's just, and you're parking at the city hall.
That's where we always park. The vendors always park there, yes.
Yeah, there's enough room there because it goes all the way around the building. It's never getting used,
Right.
so I'm sure we'll be okay.
Well, it
with
is
that.
used for staging for picking up the little kids in the parade, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but
Yeah.
I'm saying we might suggest that you, if you can, have them go around the back side of the city hall, around this way.
And park over by the
And
school
park
district?
right behind us, right here.
Okay, all right, I'll tell them that.
And then they can still walk through the sidewalks right here to get the shortcut to where they're headed.
All right. Then my next question is, may we, and we are usually open on Saturday, but we are not open, obviously, on Sunday, but may we be open on Sunday and use the south parking lot of West Liberty and Lafayette?
Doesn't cause me any problems.
I don't
think that'll be a problem.
foresee that as being a problem.
We have a traffic
I mean, if we're gonna do we have to give approval as a council for this?
Well,
Or is this something that you could just,
I can't do that. It would have to come from council, but as Chief Collins just pointed out, we don't have a traffic control order for that, so it would just have to be blocked off. So we can do that if you tell us to.
what would be blocked off? Liberty Street
The
on
parking
Sunday?
lot.
Just the
south
parking lot.
Oh,
Veterans parking
And then
lot.
DPW brings us a roadblock and we put it in front of the driveway?
And obviously, those will still be there from the night before.
yeah.
God willing, they don't steal them, but
No.
they'll still be
It
there.
would still a
You ever
roadblock.
tried picking one of those things up?
Yeah, they're hard.
Yes, she has.
No, my husband does.
Do the vendors, you have an interest in all the vendors to be there on both
Oh,
days?
strong interest, strong interest. If it turns out that not that many are going to be there on Sunday, then I probably would let somebody know that we wouldn't be there on Sunday, but I suspect that's not going to be the case.
The previous Pumpkin Fest is uptown. They've been doing it, right here between the Herald and
Right.
Normie's lot.
Right.
And under the tent thing there, and they were just asking to move down there, and they did it both days.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with this.
I don't foresee that being a problem either. But you're looking for a motion on something
So
like
you-
this? She's multiple questioned us here.
Yeah, I know.
So the first motion then would just be to approve the use of Veterans Parking Lot from 8 AM to 5 PM on Saturday? Would that be the first motion?
Saturday and Sunday.
Saturday
Maybe
and
might as well
Sunday.
both.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
wasn't
we
sure
can-
about Sunday. I didn't know when the Pumpkin Fest ran on Sunday. I couldn't find it on the website
You're
anyplace.
asking to block off that parking lot so they can keep their stuff up?
Really, I asked them about that, and some of them might, but a lot of them are worried about tents getting blown by wind or something like that. So-
Or stampeded because we're expecting a huge concert that night?
Yeah, so I don't know necessarily that they're going to keep their tents up. I might keep the signs up that run between West Liberty and the bakery that we'll be putting up. I might ask to keep those up. But, I don't know that the vendors are necessarily, they might.
That's a lot of parking to knock off for.
You don't intend to consolidate it under one tent like it has been?
No,
Okay.
we're going to do it the way
Everyone-
that
the
we do our
vendors will have
normal
their own
Saturday,
thing.
except in the other parking lot.
Yeah. Well, them moving their own stuff shouldn't be a
So
problem.
Yes.
So the parking lot next to the grocery store, that, where the market is currently, that will be open for parking?
Well,
No,
the
we're gonna
Pumpkin Fest told me
block off
they
both
use
of
that
them.
parking
That's
lot.
the bouncy toys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Oh, okay.
so we're moving to the other parking lot because of that.
Okay, all right. So it's not just you, it's you and another activity that you're making
Well,
accommodations for?
the Veterans Parking Lot isn't part of the Pumpkin Fest boundaries, so that's why I'm coming to the city.
All right, I understand it now, thank you.
Wow, traffic being all diverted around that corner, that's gonna be tough business.
Yeah, but you're gonna get a lot of foot traffic.
Uh-huh, yeah, okay. We're a tight little town, we do our best.
It's only 2 days.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll make the motion that we approve the use of Veterans Parking Lot from 8 AM. Is that the time you want, 8 AM? 9, what do you want?
Well, actually, yeah, we'd set up about 6:30, 7 o'clock, and then open at 8 AM.
Okay, so it'd be 8 AM. We set up at 6:30?
Well, it'd probably be
Well, they need-
6:30 then.
Yeah.
Okay,
they need
okay,
to-
okay.
Make it 6:30.
All right.
And then, and if we closed at 5, it usually takes
At
us,
dawn.
it takes us about an hour to clear out too. So on that note, it would be really 6:30 to 6 then.
Okay. I'll try this again. I'll make the motion that we approve the use of Veterans Parking Lot from 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday, September 28th and September 29th.
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
Further discussion on that?
Well, I just wanted to ask are you going to request that all the vendors pull their stuff out of there? Because if it were free on Saturday night, people could park there for the event.
Okay, if that's what you want, then I'll do that.
I mean, doesn't that make sense?
Yeah,
they're gonna have
I
to
can do
pack their
that.
stuff up.
Yeah.
That's fine. I can do that. What about the signs that I usually set up along Lafayette? You want me to move those too?
You know, typically, didn't they just
I don't-
kind of gather them up and lean them against the fence?
Typically, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that then.
Yeah.
I'm going to set them up the next day. All righty, those are my questions. I'm good?
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Knolls of South Lyon. A new project in the works. Proposed for the end of Mill Street. Come on aboard.
Mr. Mayor, I'd suggest that we do we hear from the city's planning consultant.
That's
And,
what I'm asking him to do. He's sitting over here.
I don't know if we have a representative from the owner, Mr. Elko. I think we should invite him to respond second. Then we could see if anybody from the audience has comments, have a follow-up, and then the council could discuss the matter.
As long as they know comments are for a couple minutes and we don't want repeating going on. It doesn't look like a huge crowd, so we're probably going to be all right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council members. Just to give you a little history, I'm Carmen Aventini, CIB Planning. And just a little history on this project. Mr. Alco first applied to the Planning Commission for a rezoning from R2 to R3 to be able to develop this as a single-family development and to take advantage of some of the natural features on the site. The Planning Commission recommended that he come back for a planned development rezoning as opposed to requesting an R3 zoning, give a little more flexibility to save natural features, work with the open spaces, and come up with a better development that will also meet the goals of his project. One of the things I'd like to note too with this planned development, in terms of the overall density of the project, it's the exact same thing as an R2 development. So there's no increase in density over the R2 being requested. So we worked quite a bit with the applicant, all of the consultants and the department heads. There's been a significant amount of natural features being saved on the site. A lot of the more significant woodlands on the east side of the property have been saved. The areas around the wetlands, and there's a significant amount of open space, valuable open space down the spine, so to speak, of the development that will be available for residents and also for people that might want to use the system of walking trails that's going to be proposed. So overall, it's a very nicely designed project and is something that will enhance the character of the area. Probably the biggest item of discussion and debate, which I'm sure you're aware of, is a potential second means of access. The applicant and everybody reviewing it did look at what the options might be for providing a second means of access. And really the only potential, given the natural features on the site and the other site constraints, the only potential would have been off of one of the cul-de-sacs. And I know the names changed between the plans, but it would be the one closest to Mill Street was the cul-de-sac that was discussed being open.
Kestrel?
Obviously, I'm sorry?
Kestrel?
Yeah, Kestrel. And we had a number of different review letters from department heads. Police had indicated they thought it should be a thoroughfare. Fire department said, yeah, we'd like to have it as a thoroughfare, but if you did a proper emergency access, we could live with that if it were properly maintained. We also looked at, balancing the interests, the public interests for having the access with the desire for the residents to not want to have access. And we heard that loud and clear at the public hearing. and obviously they were concerned about any traffic that might be going through there. We thought that having emergency access would be a good middle ground, because the only time you'd really need to use the emergency access would be if there were an accident at the front of the development, at the where Mill Street comes in off of Mill Street. If there were an accident where no other emergency vehicles could get through to be able to access development, at that point in time, the emergency access drive would be used. And I've been doing this for 30 years, and I don't think I've ever seen a development that I've reviewed where the emergency access was ever needed. So it's one of those rare occasions, but it's there if you need it. And so obviously there are folks who want it to be a through street. There are folks that don't want anything to go there at all. And we thought that the emergency access was a kind of a middle ground. But overall, the development itself is nicely designed. At this point in the process, you'd be approving potentially a planned development rezoning. If that were approved, it would then go back to the Planning Commission for final site plan review, where they would look at things like the type of buildings, sidewalks, street trees, entryway landscaping, all of those things, building envelopes, all of those detail items would be reviewed by the Planning Commission and would require site plan approval and the design of the emergency access drive with input from the department heads would have to be included before the Planning Commission could approve that final site plan. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. You've got a review letter that I had submitted. You got the review letters from other consultants. You have the minutes, the draft minutes from that meeting, which are fairly comprehensive. And also the city attorney, Tim Wilhelm, was present at that meeting also, if you should have any questions for him on the project too. One of the other points is the residents were concerned about in terms of this emergency access, how can we ensure that it remains an emergency access, that it doesn't become just a cut through for people, and that it's properly maintained. And that's something that in the final site plan review, we would review the condominium documents and make sure that a mechanism is in place to not only build it the way that it needs to be built, but so that it's also maintained, and that if it weren't properly maintained, the city would have the ability to go back in, make those improvements, and then bill it back to the association or to the property owner. So I think we can put that mechanism in place.
That would be the responsibility of the development then, the association, or
Yes.
that would be the city's?
The
Okay.
association. Their responsibility, but we always like to back it up in there with the ability for the city to remedy a problem rather than something existing that would be a health, safety, and welfare issue for residents or for the community. We always want to make sure we have the ability to go in there and remedy it, and we put that in their condominium documents. Once again, I've never seen that have to happen either. Generally, in a condo association, it's generally well-maintained,
Well,
common items. Well, the ones
I
I've
mean,
seen.
we have some history with current things that are kind of becoming cumbersome, so it's not a given that
It's not a done deal. Well, the only thing I could say is between the city attorney and myself, I think we can put the provisions in there that would at least give you the ability to take care of that if it wasn't being handled properly by the association.
Can we ask questions?
Well, I can make a comment. I have a problem with this not having an access out into the Eagle Heights area. The way it was originally designed. This town's full of dead ends already. This is another huge dead end taking place here. We had some past experience at Clark's Crossing. People didn't want to have the access through their way, and now guess who's using it? The people that didn't want it. They love it now. I think that, again, it's just too full of dead ends, and even the so-called emergency access just comes out in the same vicinity. So I'm not sure I'm for this plan the way it is.
If I could respond, it's always best if you can do it to provide a through connection. It's always the number one choice. The emergency, and I certainly wouldn't have a problem with that. The emergency access was offered as a kind of a middle ground alternative once again to be able to protect the residents who are concerned about traffic through there, and yet still provide emergency access. If this, body, if this council decided that you wanted that to be a through street, you always have the ability to make that a condition of your approval, if that was the choice. Obviously, as a planner, I wouldn't object to that at all. I would have no problem with that.
The problem is the site isn't very conducive. It's not a natural melding of the two developments to get that through street. I mean, obviously, I think Ted is right on the money that to have another access that with that kind of proximity to the main access is not nearly as effective as if it were halfway up or at the other end of the development. I wondered, when you go up, I think it's Eagle Village Drive, there's a stop sign in the middle there. Do you know where I'm talking about? There's sort of a wide
Yes.
location between two houses. And I didn't know that, because I did see there was some private parkland, and I didn't know if that was actually the split line between those two parcels, or if that was common property for the development, because that looked like it might end up lending itself to some kind of access there.
Well, there's discussion about that, and the implications were, and Tim, if you want to add to that, number one was a question about the width, whether it was wide enough. Number two, about whether, in fact, the association would be able to deed that over to the applicant to be able to make that connection. And there were obviously residents who live right next to it that were not in favor of it. And I don't know what the approval requirements, if you need to have all of the residents approving that in order to deed that over. Then the final thing was, that's where all the significant natural features, other than the wetlands, are located in that general vicinity. All the landmark trees are over there, and it would require a significant amount of regrading in order to put the road. So a lot of the natural features that we've looked to save through the planned development would be lost as a result. So that was kind of
There's a lot of negatives there,
trade-off.
that's right.
It's a challenging site. I don't think anybody's ever said that. I mean, we've discussed with them every possible access point to the north, and, every possible access point, and it's just a challenging site to deal with. So that was discussed, and Tim, I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that. I know you.
No, I think that the far eastern common area in the Eagle Heights Phase 1 creates a legal issue about who can deed it, who controls it, and has title to it currently, and what mechanism do they have to go through to actually transfer the property. So it's property that's not currently under the control of the applicant before the council.
I had a couple more that the whole idea of this PD, we've run into problems with other developments with side yard and rear yard setbacks. When you're already taking, this is like 83% of an open space lot in R2. Open space in a regular lot is 7,200 square feet. So, I'm sorry, 8,750. They're talking about 7,200 square feet, 60-some foot frontages. So we're going to essentially create the same scenario that we're having down at Sing. Somebody wants to put a deck on their backyard, and all of a sudden it's just a variance festival. I mean, everyone has to apply for a variance. I don't want to end up getting into that jam again, and I don't see how we avoid it by allowing a PD like this to go through without seeing floor plans and elevations that will be the specific models that they'll build, so that we can understand the width and depth and how those will fit onto the site envelope.
Yeah, the only difference from what's required in the R2 district, the only thing that he couldn't comply with that would be different than the R2 district was he had, I think it was 5 lots on the cul-de-sac where he wouldn't meet the lot width at the frontage because you're on a curve, and because we compress the development to save open space. But he meets all of the other dimensional, the lot area, and he can meet all of the setback requirements of the ordinance. So there shouldn't be any variance requests out of this type of a project.
What do you mean he meets the lot element, or the lot requirement, lot size. I mean, it's 83% of an R2 open space lot.
Yeah, it requires a minimum lot area of, in the R2 district, of 7,200 square feet and a lot width of 60 square feet. And there were only 5 of them that were less than the 60 feet in width. All the other requirements were met.
I'm a little bit, I'm also kind of challenged by the fact that there's an awful lot of information to try to digest from a Thursday to Monday window. I'm not very comfortable with that, to be perfectly honest, because the more I researched, the more things turned up that I had concerns about, so.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, this is the first of 2 readings, and if any of you on the council have questions or concerns between now and the second reading, please send them my way. I'll be happy to dig into it and provide you, any information that you need. You're not being asked to vote on this as a final decision tonight. This is basically first reading, and you'll make the final decision at the next council meeting. So you've got another 2 weeks to work with.
All right, Carmen, no, I copied our ordinances, and, I mean, R2 in open space is 8750. That just doesn't, that's not just something I pulled out of the ether. That's our documents, and this guy's saying 7,200 is the proposed square footage of these lots.
I'll go back and look at that. I don't recall seeing that. I'll go back and look at it, and I'll respond to it.
You want to see
Can
that?
I'd like to see that, please.
Yeah, I can get back to you on that and take a look at it.
Yeah, that's what it says right here in the South Lyon City Code, R2, 8,750 square feet.
You know, those marginal decreases in area, someone wants to put a deck on their house that is of substance enough that they can, do something, they can entertain on it or sit out and read a book, whatever. I mean, nobody wants to end up putting a 4x8 deck in their backyard because they don't have the setbacks to be able to accomplish anything larger. And like Sing Development was a nightmare trying to address that very issue.
Right. No, I understand that, and I'll have to look at that. I don't know why the ordinance would say that for plain developments if you're already zoned R2 and it's 7,250.
No, this is R2 with open space. This is a traditional R2 with open space, not a PD. It doesn't reference, I mean, your
Right.
PD
No, I
is
get
something
that.
you contract.
Right.
not-
No, I understand.
Yeah, okay.
I'll look at it, and like I said, you don't have to make a final decision on this tonight, and I can get back to you on that.
Is there a prospect of them providing floor plans and elevations that we might be able to? I know, see, the thing I like about the PD is that you have the ability to impose those kinds of requests. And when it's a regular development, they come in with all kinds of nice elevations and glossy and everything looks wonderful. We've had the good fortune that most of them make an honest attempt to get it similar to those. But there have been guys that just bald-faced turned around and put a completely different type of product out there.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and we did discuss that at the planning commission level, and we discussed what happened at Lexington Oaks, where they had preliminary designs, and we were locked into it, and then it came to planning commission, and they didn't have the type of control. What they'd like to do is review the designs, the layouts, and everything in detail at the time of final, so they know exactly what they're getting. And if there needs to be variation between lots, they can lock into it at that point in time. It's kind of dangerous to lock into general preliminary concepts at this stage. It's better to handle it at final. And everybody pretty much agreed with that, because that's exactly what we're worried about.
but I'm concerned that we end up opening a book and then we can't kind of wrest it back into our control down the road. So, I mean, we're the ones that ultimately end up being exposed. I mean, everyone plays a role in
Right.
it, it's not like we're magic or anything, but we have the final say whether the thing can move forward, and
Right.
I want us to end up acting as responsibly as we can get away with. The HRC, since there was nothing for them to assess, they couldn't make a comment on whether there was concerns about utilities, wastewater, water, all that kind of stuff, how it would what impact it might have on our system for this development to be built.
Yeah, well,
Said they would take care of it in, in site plan and stuff.
yeah, because what happens is at the time of final site plan, if they're going to come in with more detailed engineering information for HRC to look at. If for some reason or other that infrastructure changes the layout significantly, it would have to come back to you. Okay, so that's kind of one of those conditions. An applicant going through plan development process isn't going to put the type of expense and effort into designing their infrastructure that they need for final site plan if they don't know if they're actually going to get the rezoning to be able to do it that way anyway. So there's kind of a built-in protection there for the city, though, because if it doesn't match up with what they were approved for, it comes right back to you again anyway. So you're protected.
Any capital investment to make those changes is the developer's responsibility, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Yes.
Ted?
Go ahead, Aaron.
I had a lot of the same issues as Glenn did. He spoke to them very clearly. I don't need to reiterate, but I do think that a presentation of at least an elevation and a size, the size, a rough presentation. I mean, a basic presentation should happen before this goes any further. I mean, we do need to see what things are going to look like on that site as far as, and if they're going to all fit in there well. So I am highly stressing that aspect. The other thing that I wanted to address, there's two other things. One thing, Chief Collins, you were more against the emergency access than the Chief Kennedy was. Can I just hear some of your points as why?
Yes, I think Mr. Aventini addressed the concerns as to emergency vehicle access, so I won't go through all of that again. One thing in a development of 89 residences, there's going to be significant traffic generated, particularly at peak times. And my main concern is for morning rush, when we have people trying to go to work. You have many parents who choose to drive their children to school. And then you have the issue of school buses. And if you have only the one access point at the north end of North Mill Street where it intersects Kestrel, I think we're asking for trouble having only that one way in and that one way out. I think there'll be trouble there. The other thing is, anytime a development has only one way in and one way out that is open 24/7, that will hamper our patrol patterns, makes us entirely too predictable if somebody wants to commit a crime in that development. All you need is two people, one to watch that entrance and one to go and break in and do what they want to do, because they know the police aren't coming anyway but that one way. So we always prefer more than one way so we can vary our access and vary our routine and response routes.
Okay, there are things I didn't think of. I appreciate that. Thank you. And then one other thing I wanted to make note of. This was a lot of material to read in one chunk. And I'm looking for, Mr. Elko historically has, on his development sites, has put in a farming clause. Is that in here?
No, not that I'm aware of. No.
Tim?
I've not seen anything about a farming clause related to this development.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't in there. Historically, he has done that in previous developments. I just wanted to see if it was in there. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Mike.
Chief, back to the access point issue. I know for, I don't know how many years, my subdivision of 167 homes only had one access point coming out of the subdivision onto 9 Mile. How is that any different from 89 developments at Mill Street?
Interestingly, that subdivision was built before I became chief here, and I had zero input into that one.
All right. Carmen, I'm a little vague on this emergency access point. How would you control traffic other than emergency vehicles through that point?
Well, two ways. One, it would be gated, at some point to be determined. And then the other idea is to design it in such a way that although it's maintained, it can be used, that it's not something that looks like a thoroughfare, like a road, whether it be through stamped concrete or whatever method we use. But that would come at final, to design it, working with police and fire to make sure that it, once again, it doesn't look like a major thoroughfare, that it's kept as just an emergency access. You know, the landscaping next to it, a gate that can only be accessed by police and fire, those sorts of things.
So would the width be the same width as a regular road, or would it be,
No, it would be just the minimum necessary. I know we've talked about, 20 feet versus 12 feet. We haven't gotten down to that level. It would be the minimum necessary to be accessed by fire trucks. But we wouldn't want it any bigger than that.
if it was gated, who would have access to, I mean, would the community?
Police and fire.
Police and fire,
Police and
okay.
fire, yeah.
All right.
Either a lockbox or some kind of, horn mechanism or something like that. Probably lockbox.
That's great.
Now, my understanding is, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. If we were to approve the rezoning of this property from R2 to a PD,
Right.
that rezoning would be subject to the preliminary plan that's already been presented to the planning commission?
Correct.
So in the event that the developer wanted to sell the property to a third party,
Right.
having gotten the rezoning to a PD, would that new buyer then still be subject to the preliminary plan?
Yes, absolutely.
And if anything were to change regarding that preliminary plan, then it would have to come back in front of the planning commission and ultimately us for approval?
Yes, depends on the significance of the change. I mean, if you had to, shift a lot by a half a foot or 6 inches or something like that, the planning commission could potentially deal with that themselves. But any significant change would have to come back to the council.
Significant being if they wanted to put more units? Or-
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
All right.
absolutely, yes.
All right, I just want to make sure of that. All right, and then,
50 feet, or 50 or 60, I can't.
so this on the agenda tonight is just to approve the first reading of the rezoning from an R2 to a PD.
Yeah, to introduce it, yes.
To introduce it?
You have 2 weeks and then would be asked to make a decision at the next meeting.
And if we didn't go with this emergency access road, the flip side would just be put a regular street connecting that cul-de-sac to the new development?
Correct. Well, you also have the option of making no second means of access, which I don't think anybody's recommending that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go Harvey. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I want to follow up on one thing that Mike was just asking. This is not our last bite of the apple visit. We're going to see this again, how many more times?
Once,
One more time? And that's
Yes.
for the final?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Joe?
Okay, I was not at the planning commission meeting, so I didn't get a sense. But I was curious, Mr. Aventini, can you give us a sense of support from the residents of this city, if there was support for this or against this?
Well, and because there were a lot of different opinions as to whether they liked the development or not, my opinion was that it wasn't so much that they were against the development itself, that they were against having any kind of a connection from a cul-de-sac. That seemed to be the big emphasis.
Okay.
Was that kind of the way?
And if there were to be a secondary access, where that location would be. Nobody wanted it by them. Is basically what it amounted to.
Not in my backyard.
Because I would like to hear, I mean, as an elected official, I primarily, I make my decisions based off of what the people want, so I'd like to hear what people have to say about this. If there's anybody, but Mr. Mayor.
Well, they'll be here next time.
I have a couple more, actually. 2D in our agenda here. It says, glass switch, jeez. Okay. Usable open space shall be provided at least equal to the total of the minimum usable open space which would be required for each of the component uses of the development. The city may, if deemed appropriate, require for planned development more or less open space than the required by this chapter. What is the minimum usable open space per component use of this property?
I would have to get back to you with the exact
Exactly.
number on that.
You know what I
There's
mean?
more, I can tell you there's more open space than you would get in an R2 district if you look at the parallel plan. There's a lot more open space that's being preserved.
If you look at the parallel plan, which brings up another issue.
Maybe Mr. Alco can give you that number.
The parallel plan isn't R2 with open space, its parallel
Correct.
plan is open, or is just R2.
Correct.
So we're not pitting apples to apples.
R2 and R2 open are two different things.
Right. Okay, to speak sort of to Mike's question, if this plan weren't to be acted on within a year, would it, if it were approved and was turned into a PD?
Right.
And wasn't acted on within a year, would it revert back to R2?
It would, I think the ordinance calls for it to revert back. Does it have to be an actual action, or I think it has to, that's more of a legal question.
If you give me a moment, I'll look through the ordinance.
Okay,
while-
thanks.
Because usually I've run into this in many cases. Does it go automatically, or does it have to be an actual action by the city council to turn it back?
Right.
In many of the other cases I've seen, it has to be an action, but.
Well, as belt and suspenders, I would want council action rather than relying on operation of law or your ordinance to complete the reversion.
I guess my only concern with that is if just by happenstance it's overlooked and the calendar gets away from you and you don't act, you have the intent but you don't act within the window and something changes and suddenly you've lost that opportunity again, that would be unfortunate.
If I may?
Yep.
The ordinance does talk about an automatic reversion to the
Okay.
zoning district that existed on the property before it was zoned PD if the time periods are not satisfied. There is a provision for extension as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, now, the access thing is really going to end up being a fundamental concern, I think. If there's a water main underneath the main street, it blows up. People are frozen in their subdivision. I mean, that just seems completely impractical. Even with the emergency access, you're suggesting that it should be made in such a way that only emergency vehicles would be able to avail themselves to that. Clearly, if there's some long-term concern that obstructs traffic from moving in and out of there, we need some way to move people in and out. And to make it so constricted that it's a per event kind of an application seems pretty short-sighted to me.
Well, going back to the original point that I made, it's always, if you can have a second through means of access, it's always a good idea if you can do that. What you're doing is you're balancing the impacts that would have versus the public health, safety, and welfare. And that's why I said we were looking for a compromise that would, make it safe, but still make it beneficial for the residents. They wouldn't feel like they've got a lot of additional traffic through there. You always could potentially come up with a million different scenarios where something could happen. And that's ultimately up to you to make that decision under this rezoning request. If this were just a straight request to go to R2, then he would probably have to put the road through.
Well, I guess, Mike, I'm just suggesting, what is our standard, 33 back a curb?
I'm not sure.
I think that's what it is. The county's is 27 feet back a curb to back a curb. I mean, at least make it so that it's a road that would be, and I mean, I like the idea of the gate and all that stuff to isolate, unless there's a real need to use it. I don't have a problem with that. I just don't want to end up being in a position where it's a really compromised and therefore unsafe way to travel back and forth. If you've got cars moving past each other in that area, you don't want to, put people in a position where they might get in an accident because it's too narrow.
So you're saying that if we went with the emergency access, even though it's gated, make it wide enough and that if you did need it as a second means of through access, the cars could get through there if for some reason something happened, where over a 1 week period or 2 week period or whatever, while they were fixing the problem, the traffic could still go through there and they wouldn't be blocked in. That's always an option also, once again, the direction could be given to the planning commission. You have the ability with a rezoning like this to attach conditions to it if there's something that that you think will make it a better, safer project. You always have that ability to do that here.
See, the site that Mike had referenced, you don't have to get very deep into that before it branches out into alternative routes.
Right.
So although it is one entry from the Mile Road, it's not a very long stretch before you get to where you have alternative methods of getting around in that area. And that's before Clark Crossing even went in.
Mm-hmm.
So you've just got very little exposure there. Here, I mean, that whole first leg, you're in deep, so. Okay, that's all I had, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I add one other point to this? And I think it's important to weigh this in your consideration of this request. We asked the applicant to go for a planned development because we thought that saving natural features and creating more open space would make it a better development, would make it better for the people that are living in there, it'd make it better for the community, wouldn't really change the density of the project. The applicant is more than free to come back under the R2 zoning and just ask for site plan approval without going through this rezoning process. It wouldn't save the open space, it wouldn't save the natural features on the site. So in our opinion, there's a true benefit to the community by going through the planned development, even though he didn't have to. He could have just come for straight R2. So I think it's important to note that. That was something we thought would be a win-win for the community, for the city, and for the applicant. So
He could also offer the middle ground of R2 with open space. He's got R2 straight in his alternative plan. So, I mean, then you are able to capture the natural resources that are on that property, so.
and that's something he would have to discuss. We looked at a planned development as a way to, once again, we didn't want to go into higher density that would be looked at under the R3. We wanted to keep it at the R2 density and find a way to preserve the open space. So the planned development was a good way of meeting that middle ground. And, maybe he could go to a different option, but I don't know that with a different option, you're going to get a better design out of the development. Our first review, he's moved units around and made changes to it based on our recommendation to make it an even better project before it came to you. If you look at the site plan, you've got a large chunk of open space going right down the center of the development. And if you look at a lot of residential developments that have been improved in the past out there in other communities, a lot of the open space is not the high quality open space, it's the leftover pieces. We're not getting the leftover pieces here, we're getting quality open space.
All right, we invite the developer to speak.
Good evening, Paul Alco. Great questions. I think what I want to start with first is that at the Planning Commission, it was a lynch mob, and been in this spot before. What it came down to is the residents all said, we understand the need for this other road. And if not getting another road in means we have to hate the project, they were willing to do that. But what they were explained to is that they didn't live on a cul-de-sac. What they had is that roads that were designed to go through, but it has been so long since anything had happened, they just got to feel like a cul-de-sac. And as we worked with the residents, worked with that, talked through at the meeting, what we found that they really weren't against the development, they were against the fact that their way of life, the way they had it for all these years, with the feel of a cul-de-sac would be changed, and they couldn't see the real benefit of why a second entrance, less than 200 feet away had any real benefit to the traffic patterns or anything else. So being in my spot with guidance from Planning Commission, guidance from the Mr. Aventini, we really spent a lot of time trying to find that. Ultimately, the best spot would have been on the far side, but I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Mr. Wilhelm.
Mr. Willow explained, there is no legal way for us to gain access through that association because it was never deeded as an access. And I would say the odds of getting whatever percentage of the residents to agree to allow us to use that would probably be astronomically poor. So it's not that we tried to go around the wishes of the police chief. We listened to the residents, didn't really come up with the idea that you had. That's, as I sat back there, I said, you know what, you're right. If we needed to have a little bit more space, so if, let's just say a meteor hit right on our boulevard and it took 2 weeks to repair it, that is a pretty valid thing. We spoke almost completely about the need for emergency vehicles. We never thought about the catastrophic that could happen with a water main breaking or who knows what else. Now, I would think it'd get fixed fairly quickly, but that still wouldn't help anything for that, amount of time where, and maybe it would come down to people just having to slow down. Maybe people would just say, you know what, we understand this, and it could be as much as when a bridge goes out, where you put a stoplight up, says 1 lane traffic, you people go through for 2 minutes, you people go through for 2 minutes. So what we're really looking here is to provide a quality development. We're looking to add to the value of the residents that are there. And something has to happen with this, and I think the best quote I heard is that this is the best project we've seen proposed for this, but the other side of that, which is it, how do you say your last name?
Just Glenn is fine.
Councilman Glenn, is that you would find the glass half full, half empty. You would say, well, it means the other ones were so bad maybe that this, by comparison, makes it palatable. But I think that we've really spent the time, didn't try to ram anything through. Would really have loved to have been in the ground this year because the market is pretty good right now. And the house building industry in Southeast Michigan has come back. We've got some different plans that we've had. You may have gone through some of my developments. We're trying to be reasonably priced houses. We're not trying to be McMansions. As you've driven through the sub on the other side, you've seen the houses that are there. It's going to be hard for us to go to a $400,000 house if, what we have in the same neighborhood is there. We think we're 230 to 275. We think we're, a ranch maybe 1,400 square foot. We think a story and a half is 1,700 minimum. We think a colonial, or probably more like 1,500 on a story and a half. Probably 1,650 to 1,800 on a colonial, depending on what it is. I just finished a development that I did on 11 Mile and Milford Road. It was the villas at Crystal Creek. It was duplexes that went broke that we split into 50-footers. And as I stated at the Planning Commission meeting, they were too tight. 50-foot doesn't give you a chance to really turn. But with 60, 65, as long as you don't have a side entry garage, you had the same size houses I have in my 90-footers at the Heights of Elko Farms, which are, in my opinion, are just great houses. I think what we may find that the market is a little better than we're giving it credit for, and maybe the price comes up a little more. I told the residents that were here, I think when it's said and done, we will raise the value of their houses just by what ours cost for people that will, come into that, is what we've seen. We saw houses 3 years ago that we were selling for $210,000. Same house today is $310,000. It baffles the mind that it could have moved that quickly. We will have, and we're still kind of working on what is the right house, what is the right product, because we have spoken to the fact that we wanted to have somewhat affordable housing. I think we stated that. Mr. Aventini would say that was brought up in our presentation. I think people were looking at, we wanted to give something that people could afford to come here, not make it just an exclusionary club. Councilman Glenn, I think that was a great idea about the decks. Is there a way that we can provide for a reasonable sized deck allowance in this being a PD? I mean, I've just looked at one of my residents who built a deck on a house on one of my 3-acre sites, oh my God, it makes the Mackinac Island Grand Hotel look like it's a piker. And I'm not sure we're looking for a 40-foot deep deck, but a 10, 12-foot. Can we find a way to say, we know you're going to come in, as you have said, and ask for a variance for that. Can we allow in this PD, because I think that gives us a lot of different spots, can we allow for a reasonable sized deck to be accounted for in our building envelope so that they don't have to come for that? Because I think a patio, they don't have to ask for a variance, it's only
you're
a
right.
deck.
It's that grade, yeah.
So these are some great questions, and, this not being my first time I've been here, and I'm pretty level-headed and listen to you guys and find that it's a lot better to work with you than against you. I really kind of take what you guys say and try to put it into something so that it makes it easier for all of us down the road, and that's it. I'm kind of curious, Aaron, on the question about the farming. That one kind of caught me. What was the reason for that, just out of curiosity? The noise, the chemicals, or what were you looking not to have there?
It was just a question.
All right, pretty much all the land that we have put in development, we still are an active farm. We still farm just short of 2,000 acres. And what we have found that if you look at my developments that have soybeans across the undeveloped portion versus the other developers who have weeds and trees and everything else, people come into my development and they say, wow, is that green going to be there forever? I said,
I'd like to keep things separate. I'd like farming to be farming, building to be building, and I'd like
to
that
answer your question,
open
I had
space just
no
needs to be taken
intention,
care of.
no intention of ever farming this piece. It's gotten a little bit on the unruly side with the brush and everything else, and quite frankly, I don't really want to take my equipment through that. So I had never any intention of farming this.
That's fine, that was my question.
Yep, I just was curious why it was asked if somebody, I thought it was a
Like
chemical
things to
thing.
be separate, that's all.
Yeah.
One business with one business with another.
No, if this was going to be an inventoried property for the next 20 years and it wasn't in the city of South Lyon, it may be something we entertain. But at this point, no. We have no intention of farming.
Thank you.
So that was a good question. It just caught me by surprise. So the Planning Commission, of course, is going to see what elevations and what we do have. We've looked very closely at the houses that are there. We don't want to upsize them so much that it makes them dwarfed for fear that it could hurt their values. We want to have something that's probably, I think as time has gone on, we'll have a little larger house than the existing houses that are there. We'll probably have more brick on them. Most of those houses, of course, a lot of them are aluminum siding from the era they were from. We'll, of course, today's age, I'm competing against other products, so I have to have an elevation that's aesthetically pleasing to people. So, we'll bring back some stuff for you to look at, and I think you'll be happy with it. Did I skip over any of the questions that you had or not? Just going by memory because I forgot my pen. I didn't really expect to speak tonight. I thought it was a more formality, but I'm glad you gave me the opportunity.
Would you entertain the idea of putting a R2 with open space plan together?
I really think that the design that we came up to, I think it would be somewhat, I'm trying to be kind with this. The Planning Commission worked really hard, and they really came up and they really liked the way we used our open space, liked the way we saved the features. I would say that it would be, and I like the way the product looks right now, I think from a marketing standpoint, because this is something you don't want another dog. As you didn't say dog, but you said there are certain developments that didn't do well. I really think that for what you
No,
gave
actually, I
us-
didn't say that. I just said that they had represented they would put one thing in and they ended up putting in something else. I didn't characterize it as a dog or anything like that.
I interpreted it that way. But I guess what I'm saying is I think that the extra square footage that you would get versus what you would lose, I think would not benefit what you're trying to, and it may hurt what I'm trying to do for the long-term project. And I think also would maybe be, saying to the Planning Commission, why do we do this? Because I think they spent a lot of time. We had extra meetings and everything else. Certainly I could entertain it, but I really think that the product that we're offering is a very good product, and I'd like to stay with that. And also I don't want these things to become 2 years to get done. I've been in these things before. The last really big PD I did, of course, was the Heights at Elko Farms, which was all part of that. And it took a year longer than it should have, and it was one of the things that probably led to Ivanhoe Huntley going bankrupt, because it lost a year of marketing, and by the time they got going, the market had turned, and, we do need to be somewhat time. It's a very cyclical thing. To tell you right now, I'm nervous about what is going on with Syria. I'm nervous with what's going on with Russia's bantering back and forth. I mean, 3 years ago, things were not very rosy in this whole area, and it's changed, and you really want to kind of be there when it's good. And
I
that's
can
my
certainly
theory.
sympathize with that. I guess my concern, you had suggested that we retailor the language of our PD ordinance to kind of shoehorn in some allocation for a deck, just to preserve your ability to present this plan and make us feel more comfortable. I don't feel
I listened to
comfortable
what
about
you said, and
rushing
you said that you
something through
didn't
like
want
that.
89 people going in front of the ZBA, which is their right. But I said, if there's a way that, if the ZBA is ultimately going to approve the deck because they see that it doesn't matter, and I'm saying I don't know that to be true. If we're looking for a way to keep 89 people, and I'm sure there won't be 89, if we're looking for the ability to say this is a reasonable deck, this is a PD, we have some other things we can do. This was not anything I had thought about till you said that, and just me thinking out loud I said that. I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to tailor-make something. I'm trying to find a way to a problem you presented and asking out loud if there's something that can be done.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, and maybe I shouldn't have spoke at all. Maybe I should have said.
No,
hello.
I mean, I take your point. I'm just hoping that you understand my position. So we can quickly put something together that seems reasonable, and, the law of unintended consequences, then down the road, we find out that we've stepped in it. I don't want to do that.
Right. I feel very comfortable on the size of the lot that is here. It's twofold. One is it's plenty big as far as the envelope for building the house. Two, if you get too big, it just becomes, people seem to be asking for a lot that's manageable, size-wise. Some people want to play golf. Some people are getting to the point where they want to downsize from the bigger house to this. I think we're offering a product that will be well received by the public.
Well, I think that you have imported some features in here with the internal paths and things that clearly in any zoning class you could, provide that same feature. But I was appreciative of your taking that into consideration. I'm sure planning had pushed.
Planning was very
strongly to
helpful.
do
I
that.
mean, and I think we were very accommodative of what we did. We weren't looking to be antagonistic. I don't think there's many things we just laid on the ground and pounded our fists and kicked our feet and said, no, we're not doing that. I think we worked very well with them.
I had one more question on your plan there. I couldn't read the small print. How wide are your streets?
Magnifying glass.
How wide are your streets?
God.
Because we had a problem with
Can
the
you help me
developer
with
came
that?
in, they were too skinny.
We didn't bring our engineer tonight. Not that I'm cheap, but I'm frugal.
I mean, our road standard isn't evacuated because of a PD. Those are still 33-foot back of curb, back of curb.
I would,
That's what I was
Yeah.
reading. I can't read it, but I thought I said saw 30 feet.
Oh,
well, you're having trouble to find print. I can't read his name from here to there, so I feel your pain. Yes, I will give you that,
I think.
I hope. It's the mileage, not the age, they always tell me, Mr. Mayor.
I just can't, I don't know, just something to
If I could
check.
borrow your glasses, I could look at it maybe.
The glasses aren't working on this.
It's 33.
30. That's what I thought it came up with.
you said 30?
33.
Yeah, okay.
Curb to curb.
That's our standard.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what my question was. All right. Anybody else?
Did I address all the questions? I hope I didn't miss one. If I did, I apologize, but I think I,
They'd speak up
Mr.
right
Mayor,
now.
could I comment on a couple of things that Mr. Elko said? And I'll preface my remarks and I'll keep them brief. The police department doesn't perceive the developer as the enemy of the police or the enemy of public safety. In fact, he brought up how the residents were objecting to the permanent through street, but just on their court. So
oh, they were glad to have it on somebody else's
Yeah,
court.
exactly. So what I'm saying is, on any given quote-unquote court, you would have 8 or 9 residents objecting versus the first responsibility of the city is to the public safety and welfare of all of the citizens. So if you have 8 or 9 residents objecting to turning what was designed as a through street into a through street, that's at the expense of, in my view, public safety and 89 other residences. So on balance, you've got 8 or 9 versus 89. But the main responsibility is to the public safety, and we need that road for the public safety. Some of the residents were also saying, well, what good would it do if the other entrance was a couple hundred feet away? That second permanent entrance then would allow anybody that wanted to go east or north to use that second access point, and anybody who wanted to go south to use Mill Street. It also would provide 2 ways out for school buses that are going to different schools. So that, I'll leave it
They
at
have to
that.
go all the way around the block, the big block.
I can't dispute any of those. Like, the main thing I said about the residents, and it was more as he spoke of. They have gotten very comfortable. It's been very good for what they've had. And I think some of them said, the developer said there would never be a through there, and I said that's not right for them to have said that because it was always designed as that. If we could find a way to work with the residents, to work with the police chief, with the fire chief, to be able to have a, a safety entrance and gate that would work, that was our goal, to appease the residents who lived on those courts. And ultimately, I didn't promise or say anything. I said, these are beyond, it's a higher pay grade than I have that'll make that decision. But if we could do that for the residents, that was my goal. Not to look weak, not to look like I was favoring them, just to show that, yes, you do have this, you've had that opportunity, and you know what? It's been a good thing, and if we can find a way to keep you in that spot, we would try to do it. That's what we did at the planning commission level. Correct? Oh, you weren't here, were you?
I wasn't at the planning commission, no.
For a minute, I thought I needed your support.
If we were needed, we would have been here to protect you also because public welfare and safety is number 1.
These guys are unbiased, I like them.
All right. Any more questions from the council?
No.
All right, thank you, Mr. Elko.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just quickly, Councilman Kivel, the comment you made about the open space option, I did look at it. Yes, they could go to that particular square footage. What that does though is it takes away from the open space area that was allocated. I mean, the site's X number of square feet. So yeah, they could go to a larger lot size. It would eliminate some of the open space. What I would recommend as an alternative is have the applicant submit a plan showing what the tentative footprints would be with the decks to show that they all could be built with reasonably sized decks without having to go for variances as opposed to taking away from the open space. Because, once again, open space it's a different concept. Instead of having a bigger backyard, you've got more open space that you can still, recreate and access. But, I mean, that was a very good point. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen the other. My recommendation to you is, keep the smaller lot sizes, keep more open space as opposed to having bigger yards. And we, obviously we are a city, not a township. We're also offering a little different product than is being offered in in Lyon Township.
Let me say this, we could also show the footprint when the prospective customer comes in, show what deck size would fit within that. And not say that you have to go get a variance to get more, but just, you tell people what deck is allowed, that, then they seem to be able to live with it. Whatever you, it's funny, if you tell people this is what you can have, they say, okay. And you seem to live with that. That might be something we want to do also.
Well, just to say the comment of the R2 with open space, the formula gives you less open space. That's only if you use the same amount of houses. I mean, there's nothing that says you can't use the open space that they've created as that's the fixed thing, and then you tailor how many houses you have to cut back to be able to get to that, so.
Yeah, and that was actually one of the comments that was made by the Planning Commission. They had talked about, well, can you cut back on the number of units, which obviously would create more open space. And that was, and Mr. Elko addressed that and said, look, at some point, I mean, we're at the R2 density, which is what it's currently zoned right now. If I start dropping beneath that, is there any sense in, not just going for an R2 project and meeting the R2 requirements? So it's kind of a balancing act, and that's what we looked at with him. We asked him to make a number of changes when he was reviewing, when he's putting the plan together, and that actually did cut down on, from his preliminary discussion, cut down on some of the units that he had, but right now he's at pretty much where he'd be for an R2, which it's currently zoned. So kind of a trade-off.
I get that. I guess my point was to just an illustration that there's balancing points on a number of different fronts. I mean, you are the one that creates what it is. So, I mean, you have to decide, do you value more open space? Do you value more money in your pocket? Do you value the accoutrements that are in this PD? So.
Right.
I mean,
And ultimately, as a council, if you're not happy with the design and the layout before you, that's your call in terms of, whether you want to approve it or not. The recommendation was 5-2 from the Planning Commission to approve it. But in terms of open space, assuming that the other conditions that you discussed with the decks and all are met, certainly the open space that's provided on the plan is good. It's a fair amount. And we have saved the natural features on the site, a lot of them.
Can I address one thing about the PD? And this is from my past dealings, I'm trying not to bore you very long, is that the reason most people have come and done a PD is they throw in some extras and they throw in some open space stuff and they ask you for a 10 or a 20% bonus in what the proposed density would be. And I'll be the first to tell you that at my Heights at Elko Farms, we got a 25% bonus for giving what was assumed to be these special features. On this project here, we didn't ask for the bonus. We asked for the support and the idea and to put it together because it had been, what was the word for it? A troublesome project or whatever. It had been 15 years in the making, wherever it was. We were looking to come in, kind of find an easy path to get to, come up with a good product, and the Planning Commission was very good with that. We didn't ask for, okay, we're going to do a PD, so give us an extra 10, 12 lots. We'll jam the size down smaller. What we really came into says, look, this is what we could do. If we can find a way to do it so it has more benefit for the residents, has more benefits for what the Planning Commission thought, that's how we came to that. We really kind of turned it loose to the Planning Commission and really let them do it. And we actually took units out, made it so that it kind of fit what it was. I think it was Planning Commission member Maggie was probably one of the most, vocal and,
who'd have thought?
help. All right, so I wrestled with her a little too. That's beside the point. But anyway, that's the whole idea of why we didn't just go do it. We didn't ask for the extra, so the open space that's there is for everybody. I don't think that little bit of extra space you're talking about, if we'll bring you the footprints of the houses, you take a look, and if there's a reasonable sized deck, the ZBA can just say, you don't need the Mackinac Island deck.
Mm-hmm.
And I think.
That may actually be a very functional solution to this, but as I said at the onset of this discussion, this was an awful lot of information to try to digest. I've got an awful lot more research to do before I'm going to feel comfortable about committing to anything, so just know that.
Right, and I think.
I mean, I'm one vote, but that's where I'm at.
Well, just give me 5 of the other. Anyway, that was what I wanted to say about the PD, is I really think this has been a spot where we've kind of worked together pretty well. And I really don't want to start over. I mean, at this point, we've really lost this year, but I want to be in the ground next year, because I don't want to be, you know, a year from now, you guys asking why haven't you started, because, you know, I'm fearful of the market, or whatever.
I get that, you know, that this is sort of a function of the way local government works. You know, you go to planning commission, then we end up having review before it moves to the next phase. Had we been involved, had I been involved along the course of this thing, I would have been raising these things at the front of the discussion, not at the end of your
And that may have
hopeful
been,
planning point, so.
That may have been misgivings on our part, because I've done a lot of these, and I've done a lot of very controversial ones, you know, where we've gotten our heads caved in pretty good before we came to a spot. This one felt like it was, you know, like we didn't fight. We didn't ask for too much. We said, this is what we can have, find a way to do this so that it makes it better for everybody. And we would have invited you to the party, trust me. It's not an exclusionary deal.
Well, I may find out that I'm not nearly as concerned once I've concluded my research as what I am at this point.
Well, that's gonna make me sleep better tonight, knowing that.
Well, like I said, I got a lot of work to do.
We'll bring us, I mean, I think at this point, what we would ask for is that we would ask for an approval from the preliminary stage. We'd like to take it back to planning commission. They're gonna see the elevation of the houses. We will so note to them the building envelope, show the decks and everything else that goes with it, in hopes that, and if we need to get, we will certainly bring you that information ahead of time. I think, is that possible? Or, you know, can they whisper to the planning commission, or is that not supposed to be? If we brought the same package of our elevations and footprints to share with the board before it goes to the planning commission. I'm just looking to.
Yeah, there's no problem with the applicant sharing information on what the proposed units are. My only recommendation is that that exact information not be made a condition of the approval process, that it just be forwarded to the planning commission, because they may have more detailed work and information that they need that might change them. And I know once again, Lexington, one of the concerns they had was they thought they were getting a lot of variation from unit to unit. And as you know, that didn't quite happen the way that they had anticipated. So by handling it this way, we want to make sure that we've got control over that.
Yeah, we see 5, 6 different elevations and models that we'll be offering with different elevations of those models. Don't want 89 of the same houses. I'm sure
Well, and
one
I
will
mean,
be
different sites configurations, you know, promote different floor plans, so.
Well, we're seeing a change now. We're seeing more ranches, more first floor masters. It's people like us. Look at you and me. You know, our kids are gone. Our knees are getting cranky. We don't want to climb the stairs on a colonial anymore. So,
Okay.
I'm with it.
so
All right.
what I would ask tonight is I would ask for the approval so we can go back to the planning commission with the comments that were so noted here, so we can try to address them. And then as we come back to you, you know, the fine tuning needs at that point. But hopefully we'll have heard very clearly what you're asking tonight and try and make sure that when we get back to you, it's already taken care of.
All right.
I think the planning commission's done a pretty good job of this so far.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any comments from anybody else? Please state your name and address.
My name is Garen Anderson. I live at 713 Kestrel Court. I was here during the Planning Commission meeting, and it wasn't just 9 people that live on a court. It was everybody in our subdivision from Mill Street, around the corner, to Pepper. And everybody came in, we were all up in arms. And we got to listen, we got to see, and the biggest concern was where that emergency access was going to go. Is it a full road? And by the end of the meeting, it was clear that the plan was for an emergency access. It wasn't going to be a thoroughfare. And, you know, yeah, we were pushing it to go over there, and they were pushing it to go over here. And it got to a point where, you know what, it's my property values, it's their property values. I'm not going to push it off on them, on the other side of the subdivision or the next court over. You know, it's my property values. It's their property values. And that's what it came down to. It was everybody in there. The plan that we saw and we yelled about for 2 hours, we were all, by the end of it, I would say happy, because it was an emergency access. And it was a narrow, if it has to be a little bit wider, but still an emergency access, that's what we're looking at. I mean, back in the day, my house was worth $200,000. I lost $60,000 basically off the top when the economy crashed. It's starting to come back, but I live on a court. Now, if I live on a thoroughfare, I don't know, maybe I won't be able to retire when I want to and move down south. But just from that meeting, and you can ask anybody that was here during that meeting, by the end of the meeting, just the settlement of the plan and the understanding of the emergency access calmed everybody. The people that live right next to where the emergency access was, they were happy. I lived 2 houses down. I was happy. So from the public standpoint and everybody that was in here from that subdivision, that emergency access that you see on the plans, we were more than satisfied. We've lived there for years, and we knew that that property could be developed. When I moved in, it was going to be light industrial. I was going to have stuff going on all night long, 24-hour shops, you know. We know that it can be built. We look at the plan, we like the plan, and if you guys can take into consideration us, the little guy that has to live there, that I live on a court, I would appreciate it. Grand Court, they live on a court. They appreciate it. Around the corner. You know, it's all, we're the little guys. Okay? I appreciate any input or consideration you can give to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carl Richards, 390 Lenox. As many of you know, I've done extensive research on this property known as Oakland 40. I just thought I'd bring up a couple facts for you to clear something up. One of the major questions is your elevation. Okay. On the Oakland 40 property, on the northern to central plateau that he has on that land, he's approximately 10 feet higher than the elevation of the base of the water tower on Mill Street. From that point, Eagle Heights is 6 feet higher, generally speaking, on average. He is the second highest elevation in town. The drop off from that general area of his northern plateau is 16 to 20 feet to the bike path, and from the bike path it's 17 feet to the watershed down below. There's quite a difference. Okay? Now, between now and the my sentiments are previously known. Between now and the next council meeting, there are several things you do not have in front of you, which you might be interested in. And if ever a piece of property needed it in this town, this one's it. One is a thorough top topo, I believe they call it. Okay, you haven't got it. Now there's an environmental impact statement. You haven't got it. Okay, and a third is a DNR analysis evaluation, which you do not have. If you notice on the last page of your package, which I have access to also, the HRC statement was not in favor of this development until more information was forthcoming. I think all of you would like to hear more of that, those questions answered before your next council meeting, be it 2 weeks or maybe 6 weeks, 2 months down the road. regarding the Oakland 40 property. Something's got to be built here and something's got to be done. But I would hate to see this turn into another $20 million disaster like we've had several of repeatedly over the last 25 years. Anyway, thank you.
Now, Carl, just for clarity, they weren't against it. They just weren't for it.
That's
I mean,
right.
they were of no opinion because they didn't have the information
Didn't
for
have
them
the
to base
information,
their
they hadn't formulated an
decision.
opinion.
That's what he said.
But you have to make your decision based on getting that information, which you don't have, okay? And I would hope you could get it or request it. This is a big deal for the city of the people of South Lyon, okay? All of these questions concern. Something's got to go here. I'm for progress, so let's make the right decision.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on. This will be coming back next meeting, I guess, as far as we know.
Don't we have to
we
make a
can-
motion?
We need a motion.
I thought this was a
On the first
discussion
reading.
thing.
No.
No, this is a first
This is
reading.
first reading.
Okay. Somebody want to make that motion then?
I'll make the motion that we approve the first reading of ordinance number blank dash 13 to amend the official zoning map of the city of South Lyon, rezoning property from the R2 district to the PD district, subject to approval of a preliminary stage 1 plan development site plan for Knolls of South Lyon at a second reading.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Guess we'll need a roll call.
Kibble?
Yes.
Kukowski?
No.
Rizzi?
No.
Wallace?
No.
Fidel?
Yes.
Kramer?
Yes.
Dixon? No.
Fail.
Okay, now we can move on to the DDA appointment.
A couple months ago, Gary Child stepped down from the Board of Directors on the DDA, put out a notice, and I received a letter from Gene Carroll, the owner of the buildings where Grimes Insurance was and the bakery. And anyways, he expressed interest, and I'd like your to affirm the appointment of Mr. Carroll to the DDA Board of Directors.
I move Mr. Carroll's appointment.
I'll support that. I just want to squeeze it.
Okay, further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, move on to winter parking. This is a discussion item.
I put this on as a discussion item simply because we need some new signs out there. They're $125 a piece. Rather than put them up and have this discussion in a month or two, I thought I could at least bring it to you now, talk about it rather than once the snow flies when we get all kinds of complaints about the police giving out tickets or I never read it and on and on and on. So I bring this before you again. I had brought it before you a year or two ago. Just so that I know what direction to take. If you want to keep it as it is, we can go ahead and order our signs and get the bad ones replaced. Chief Collins was kind enough to call around and get some sample ordinances. I think there's one from Southfield, Beverly Hills, and Walled Lake.
They're all labeled, I don't
Yeah.
remember exactly
There's a
which
lot of
ones there were.
But there were a few different ones in there.
And
Both Mr. Martin and Chief Collins feel that we could probably at least try it without the, and keep parking on the street during the wintertime and just go to an emergency type of system where the city manager or the public safety director or the god of all utilities could call for an emergency.
This a power move?
we could also have in there that, I think Beverly Hills has it in there where if there's 4 inches or more, the roads have to be cleared. So it would kind of be in addition to.
4 inches or more predicted.
Predicted, yes, sir, of snow or ice. And I guess my biggest worry is how do we inform the public? So maybe we would put out.
Do you trust them?
They predict
Sorry?
that, they predict that all the time. It's always like we're getting.
I know.
6 inches we were talking about from Dave, was it not? I'm sorry.
There was some in there with 6, there was some with 4, there's a variety. We can do whatever we want. But I just think it would be good to have it in addition to making that call so that people are more aware of it. We could put it on our website, on our access channel. As I say, though, I am worried about if we do have an emergency, how are we going to inform the public? We can put it on the radio stations. We probably
That's how
won't be
the
able
others
to-
do it. That's
Right,
how
but we probably won't be able to put it on our sign. Some of them talk about their access channel. We probably won't be able to put it on our access channel because there's only a couple people that know how to work it, and they may not be able to get in if it's a true emergency, so.
Excellent, Facebook.
You can do, I mean,
You can do
doesn't
Nixle on
like,
Facebook.
doesn't Channel 4 or whatever, the internet, a lot of the internet sites too, if you
Oh, yeah.
call in, you can call like ABC, or the local, like 247. You could declare a snow emergency. It's almost like the school closings when you check the internet.
Breaking
And they
news.
do announce those. and-
Everything's breaking news.
Even in a emergency situation, though, remember, 70 or 80% is all that's ever going to access it. There's still going to be that 20 or 30% that are going to be completely confused or surprised.
When their car's plowed in
Sure.
by you.
Yeah. Which we get it with leaf pickup, and it's not uncommon to get it with snow.
Well,
There you have it.
if this is a general discussion, all winter, I get complaints when there's no snow for like 3 months or whatever, 2 months or whatever, from my neighbors saying, why can't we park on the street? So I'm all in favor of looking at revising this, this no parking on the streets during the winter time. I'm leaning towards either somehow declaring a snow emergency and let, you know, if we declare a snow emergency and they don't move their car, that's fine. But I know it's gonna bring up issues, but I don't know how many days of the week I get complaints starting November.
Even at 4 inches of snow, when you make a plow,
Oh, it's gonna make,
4
yeah,
inches of snow, we're not going curb to curb. 6 to 8 inches we are. That's 4 passes on a typical street. 4 inches, you're still gonna be pushing a ribbon of snow up against some people's cars in front. But as long as they understand that, we're fine with it.
As long as you don't give them stripes on the side of their car, that's my concern.
We try not.
And again, I've stated in the past, another reason to have it like we're talking about, times are different. The kids are home. There's 4 or 5 cars at a house. And it's kind of hard. They're parking in their front lawns and everything. And they'd have to do that during the emergency part, but that's more understandable than doing it all winter long.
Lloyd, Dave, and I had a meeting on it, and Lloyd was extremely helpful, brought up a lot of good topics, and it was a really good give and take session, and we feel this is doable, and maybe we should try it for a season.
Just keep the old signs.
Yeah, well, we will have to
Doesn't work.
invest in some new signs talking about a snow emergency. So there is a little bit of
Yeah, it'll
investment.
be a lot more
but yeah.
expensive now, having to buy all new signs.
Just take them all down.
That's part of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Open
that's-
season.
If it doesn't work, keep the old signs. And if it doesn't work, keep the old signs.
Doesn't matter.
They need to be replaced anyways, because the complaint is people haven't been able to read them and they're getting their tickets now.
There's approximately 12 of them scattered throughout the city.
I just don't care.
So is that the direction that you would like us to go, or do you want to bring this up again, or what is your pleasure?
I'm comfortable with it. I mean, my concern is just DPW being able to clean the road, so.
Yeah, if it doesn't work, we could always do something different, but I'm in favor of,
He was willing to have a trial.
yeah, I'm in favor of seeing if it will work with snow emergency.
Is that the consensus of the council then?
I'm willing to give it a try if they'll quit piling snow in my apron.
That's not gonna happen. Now you're getting more.
Get a four-wheel drive.
We'll probably have to then bring it back to the next meeting to repeal that ordinance, so, okay?
Okay,
And to put another one in place.
sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, manager's report. You're gonna
the-
get some signs.
The
No,
last cruise-in, the last Lake Street cruise-in is September 25th, 6:30 to about 9. Pumpkin Fest is Saturday, the 28th, and Sunday, the 29th. We have movie night Friday, September 20th, and Friday, September 27th at McCaddy Park. And Michigan Seamless Tube was named by the Detroit Free Press. It'll be in the November 17th Sunday paper as one of the top 10 workplaces. So that's kind of neat
Yeah,
that it's
that's very
in
cool.
this town, so that's all I have, sir.
What movie is showing?
I knew you were going to ask, and I didn't get a chance to.
Cars 1 and 2.
Oh,
Cars 1 and 2? There you go.
there you go.
okay, go ahead. You can throw it in your lap right now.
Oh, boy. I don't have anything, actually.
Okay, it's okay. Aaron?
I don't have anything either, thank
Joe?
you.
No, thank you.
Bev? Mike?
Yes, I want to thank our city attorney, our planning consultant, and our planning commission for all the hard work they put in into this development and the work they put into working with this developer for this planned development site that we just voted down. Thanks.
Harvey?
I'd like to echo Mike's comments. I think Planning Commission and the planning people did a nice job. Notwithstanding that, I went to Depot Days this weekend, had a good time doing that. Haven't done that since my kids were little. It was a great event, and I got to wondering how the police, or how the fire department ever got all the fingerprints off of all their units. They had hundreds of kids, 10 fingers each. But anyway, it was a really nice event and everything. The park looked good, fire equipment looked good, everything looked great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. And I want to comment again on the Depot Days also, as far as celebrating the 120th birthday of the fire department, and 33rd Depot Day, and the hard work put in by the Historical Commission and the Historical Society, and they're still looking for members to join in and be part of that. Also want to note, as you're well aware, the DWRF, the project, the underwater, has been going along, and now we're reaching the main roads where people are really being hassled. I can let you know that that's just the beginning. It's not even close to what it's going to be like, but just try to stick with it best we can and get through this, and we'll be a better town for it, that's for sure. We'll be taking care of the grandkids and then some beyond there. And with that, I have to call for an adjournment.
Move we adjourn.
I'll support.
Okay, for discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That ends this meeting of approximately 1 hour and 45 minutes.
Oh, don't get over there.